Sam Nilai. At the starting of this video series, we started by creating web services, which is an ASP.NET Web API project in Visual Studio. Then we added our Xamarin Forms application that will try to get the list of the employees from the web services that will be retrieved from our database. So we have implemented the get and the post operations by that web service. And for this video today, we will be trying to invoke the put and delete web services. So those are located in my web services inside the API controller and the ASP.NET project. So we'll be invoking the put and delete web service. So this is all for coming from my API controller. So that now, right from my mobile application, I can have a user interface in which I can edit the new information about an employee. So I can change his name and his department. Then by clicking on a button called, let's say, edit, I can send the new data about that employee to my web service using the put web service here. The put web service, as with the post and with get, it will try to connect to the database to reflect the new changes to my database. The same thing will be done with the delete request here. So let's get started. Hi, during the previous video we have created ASP.NET Web Services application using ASP.NET Web API platform. The web services are contained inside our employees controller, which have services for getting, putting, post and deleting employees from our database. And from our Xamarin Forms application, we have used the service for getting all the data. So for that we have all the list of the data here coming from our web services. And we have also added the add a new employee functionality, this one that will post data from the mobile application to our web services, so it will be stored later inside the database. The purpose of the demo today is to invoke the rest of the services, which are the delete and post methods. So let's get started. For that, the web services are already implemented in our controller here. So I'll try to invoke these from my mobile application. For that, I'll go to my main page, and here right now my application just have a button that will go to my second page. But here, let's say I want to edit some existing employee. So I can do that by clicking on one employee. Then by clicking on it, I want to go to another page in which I'll have the possibility to edit an employee. Actually, here I can use the same page as the add a new employee, as here it will as all I need is a form that displays the name and department for the employee to be edited. But instead of the post button, I'll need the other buttons for edit and for deleting. So let's get started by getting the employee selected from our list view here. So I'll go to my main page here,
And inside my list view, I'll add a new click event, or it's item tapped event actually. Let's create a method for that event. So the method will be called list view on item tapped. So in each time I click on the list view, I want to get the item that I did tap it on. And I can do that by accessing my list view, so I need to give it a name. So let's say it's employees list view. Then I can access my employees list view to get the selected item, which is always of type object. So I need to cast it to an employee. So let's say as employee. And I need to reserve the namespace for employee, which is Xamarin demo app.models namespace. I'll put it in a variable. Let's call it employee. So we need to verify if that employee is not null, because here the conversion could give the null value if the selected item is not of type employee. So we should make sure we have tapped it on an item which is of type employee, is not null. If the employee is not null, then here we can go and tell our main view model that the selected employee is this one we have tapped on. So remember here our main view model. Where we have a property called selected employee, which will be used at the add a new employee page to show the data or to get the new values right from the form. So here I need to access my main view model. How can I do that? You should pay attention here that my main page already bind to the main view model. So I can retrieve the object I'm binding to, and I can do that by saying binding context. I can retrieve the object inside my binding context, and I can convert it to my main view model. Putting it inside a variable. And again, if that main view model is not null, then I can go and access the selected employee to give it the employee that I have tapped on. So this way I'm changing the value of the selected employee to the one I tapped on inside the list view. And after doing that, I go to navigate to my it's a push async. So I'll go to navigate to my add new employee, add new the name of the other page is actually new employee page. New employee page. and again here it's await async, so I should apply the await async keywords here. Let's try to run this one. So now I try to click on an employee, let's say it's Marwan HR, but here I don't get the values from that employee I have selected. Let's diagnose this issue. So if I go here to my new employee page, I see here that every time I'm creating the new employee page, I'm binding to the main view model. With every new page, a new main view model will be created. So it's not the same main view model, it's not the same instance that is bound to my main page. It's not the same instance as the new employee. So here are two different instances. I'm filling the selected employee of the view model of the main page, but not the one of my new employee page. So two different instances. So let's try a first attempt to solve this issue. So what I can do here is that I can pass parameters inside the page. So this is not the ultimate solution to do, but for the sake for the simplicity of this demo, we will do that, and we'll solve that this issue later using a better solution. So right now I'll go and pass the main view model as a parameter for my new employee page. So now my new employee page doesn't have a constructor that accepts main view model. For that I'll go and create a new one, create an overload. Here a constructor that accepts main view model. Let's call it main view model. And after the initialize component, I'll go and set the binding context to be my main view model. So that using this way, I'm passing the same instance of the main view model from my main page to my add new employee page. So this way I can keep the information stored inside the selected employee to be shown in my add new employee page. And here, as I added a new constructor and didn't change the one already existing, I'm not changing the way that the add a new employee button works, because this one will go to use this default constructor, and by using that it will just go and use and create a new view model. For add a new employee functionality, that's okay, that's fine, but for the edit functionality, we need to pass the main view model from our main page. So let's try this now. Let's try to tap on Marwan. So here it is, Marwan with the HR department. So it gets the data from my main page, right from the main view model. And here another thing to notice is that I didn't remove the binding context here. So my new employee page actually will try to bind to a new instance of the main view model, but this is done using the initialize component that will execute this XAML code here. But after that, it will reset that binding to bind to the main view model that I already have sent. So here actually we are using two bindings. Okay. Again, this is not the ultimate solution. We'll try to go to resolve this later. So now that I have passed the parameters about the selected employee, now I want to add a new button to say edit, where I can go here to change the value from Marwin to another name, then hit the edit to change this inside our web services. So I'll go to the new employee page, and after the post button I'll add a new button which we call this time put employee, and I'll go and create a new command which will be put command. So let's copy this one. Here remember we have last video have created the post command. I'll go and copy this one and rename it to put command. The put command will use the employee's services and will call a method called put employee async. So let's go and implement this method. Let's copy the same as the post employee and call it put employee async. Here we have passing our employee, and we are using the REST client, and here inside of using post, here we'll use put async coming from our REST client. But here inside my REST client, the post async accepts two parameters. The first one is the ID of the employee I want to edit, and the second one is the ID. And here I'm passing only one parameter, so I need to add the second parameter, which will be the ID of my employee. I need to pass it here. It's of type integer, it's an ID, but same ID I need to give it to my put async method. But again, as I added a new ID here, I should go back to my put employee and add the ID here. So here you might be asking why I should add the ID here. That's because inside our employees controller, if you take a look at the put employee method, which will change the employee, here it accepts two parameters. The first one is the ID of the employee you want to change, and the second value is the employee itself. Why it is doing that? As you know that inside the employee entity you have an ID. So why I'm sending that value twice? One inside the employee and one outside the employee as a separate parameter here. We are doing that so that inside my web service I can verify the two elements, so that I can be sure that that's the employee I want really to change its properties, not another employee. So let's go back to my main view model. So we need to add the ID of the selected employee here. So I'll go to selected employee dot ID, but I don't get the ID here. I only get the name and the department. And Why is that? That's if I go to my employee, I get only the name and the department. This is the employee inside my Xamarin demo application, but inside my web services application, the employee got an ID. Remember, during the last videos we said that in my Xamarin Forms application I don't need that ID, so I didn't wrote it here inside the employee class, but now I do definitely need that to get the value of that ID. So I'll go to copy that value and paste it inside my employee of my Xamarin Forms application. So let's copy it here. This is not a good layout, so let's fix it quickly. I want to show it this way better in one line. So now I can get the ID of the employee from my web services. I'm sure that this value is returned from my web service, as here you can see that inside the XML file or the JSON file I can get that value with the department and the name of each employee. So now that I have the employee ID, I can go here and use now the ID of my employee. So now I can pass the ID and the selected employee. So let's try that again. So let's select again Marwan HR. Then here let's change this value, for example, to be human resources instead of HR. And here I'll tap inside the put employee. Now the request was sent to my web services. So now if I go back to my web services and refresh the page here from my employees MVC controller, here I need to see that this value changes from HR to human resources, and the modification was done successfully. The same thing here, as they both get the data from one shared database. So now my put employee button is working right as I want it. So now I want, let's say, to test this one or to debug this application. For that, I'll go and set a breakpoint here inside this action of this command. And also I want to add a breakpoint inside the employees controller here inside this put, so that I make sure and I can see the parameters passed to this put employee method inside my API controller, the employees controller here. So the way to debug this is by going to the Solution Explorer, and here you have the option to go to your solution, right click, then set startup projects, and here you choose multiple startup projects and you select the project you want to start. So let's say I want to start my web services demo and also my UWP project, which is the I'm setting to the Windows Phone, and my Windows project also. Apply, okay. So now by clicking the start button here, you see that it changed to multiple startup projects instead of one starting project. So clicking start. So now it's loading my two applications. And now it returned the data from the database. So now I go to the add new employee button here. I'm debugging the where I can click here, and I want to change the values here. So let's change Marwan to Ahmed, for example. And let's click put employee. And here, of course, the debugger will be hidden, and I'll go to the first breakpoint here. Let's click F12 so that I can go to the next line of code, the next one. And here I can put the cursor on top of the selected employee to see its values. So we see here, if I can zoom that. So for my selected employee, it's Ahmed, working on the department Human Resources, and with ID equal to 3. Let's click F12 again, or F11, sorry. And here it will go to the put employee async from my employee services class. And it will try to invoke the put web service. So it passes the parameters, the ID and the employee. It will create, first of all, it will serialize my employee to a JSON file. For that, now I can see that the JSON file contains that information about the employee. So you see here, it's a full JSON object. Now the code will try to make an HTTP request. For that, it will set the content type to the application JSON, and then it will use the HTTP client and will invoke the put async so that it will hit the put web service inside my API controller. So here, because the put service from the employee's controller works as the following. I should pass this ID after the slash here, and the employee should be passed inside the HTTP request. So here the request, the URL call to this API should looks like API/employees/the ID of the employee. For that reason, I'm adding the ID to my web services URL. So you see here my web services URL is that URL to my localhost and API employees. And here make sure your URL ends with /, otherwise you will have to add that one here after. You will need to concatenate that with the ID. So here put async will send the ID and the HTTP request to my web service. Now if I click F11, then here the request come to my put employee web service inside my API controller, and it will pass, of course, the ID of Ahmed, which is 3, and that employee, which I can see here, it's the same employee sent from our mobile application with the name Ahmed and department Human Resources. So now inside this web services, as it have access to the database, it will first of all validate that method, then verify that the two IDs are equal. Then it will change its state to modified, and using this line of code, it will tell the database that we are changing the value of the employee to the new values, and it will retrieve that employee using its ID. So this line of code is like getting the employee and changing the name and the department values from that employee. After that, of course, the db.save changes to commit the changes to our database. Then here we'll get a response from the server telling that the HTTP status code is no content. We don't need to return anything here. You can change that, of course, to return the ID or anything you need for your application, but here we don't need any return thing. So here for the result, it's telling us that a successful status code is true. That means our request was sent to our web services. So clicking F5, so now I have the put functionality working for me so that I can change the value of any employee I want. Now let's try to add the delete functionality. For that, I'll go to the add to the new employee page, and here I'll copy this code to add a new employee. So here I call this command delete employee. Actually, I want to give these buttons some fancy colors instead of the green color, so I'll give the first one post employee background color. Let's say I'm adding, so let's choose good color. Let's say it's green, for example. And for the second one, put employee, let's give it a background color. Let's say it's the navy color, for example. And for the put employee, or here it's gonna be the delete employee, let's give it a background color of let's say it's maroon, for example. And here, as the text color inside my phone is black, I want to change that one because black color doesn't go well with the navy and maroon colors. So I'll change the text color of my button to be white. I want to give my user interface a good looking. So now let's go and implement the functionality of deleting an employee. So let's go to the put command. Let's copy this one and change the values. And here I should go to stop debugging. Now let's paste this code here, and here let's call it delete command. So the delete command will use the delete employee async method. The delete employee async method is not implemented, so we'll go to implement that method inside our employee services. I'd go and paste the copy and paste the put employee and change its name to delete employee async. For the delete employee async, I'll go to use REST client to call the delete async. The delete async accepts two parameters, which are the ID and the employee of my for my web services. Actually, here we are passing the T parameter, which is the employee, but we are not using it inside our delete async here from our by our HTTP client. That's because here inside our employees controller, we should take a look at the delete, and here you see that the delete only asks for the ID of the employee. It doesn't ask for the employee itself as for the put the put employee method. It's only asking for the ID. So we'll be sending only the ID. For that, inside this REST client, I'll go and get rid of this entity here. I'll go back to my employee services, and also don't need to pass the employee. The same thing for here. I don't need to pass the selected employee, only I need the ID. I committed an error. So here the delete employee, we said doesn't accept this one. Okay. So let's type Control-Shift-B so that we can make sure our code works fine with no errors. So that's okay. Now let's go and run our application. So let's try here, let's try to delete this one. I leave working at the finance department. So this is his information. Of course, with this one I have the ID inside that selected employee. So if I go and delete the employee and I go back to the list of the employees here, I should see that Ali from the finance department was deleted. So hit refresh. Yeah, here it is. So there is no more that employee in our database. The same here, there is that employee was deleted from our database. So now we have implemented the functionalities of getting the list of the employees, hitting the post web service, the put and delete. So by doing that, we did already implemented, let's say, the CRUD operations given by our web API project. So the same for our Windows 8 application. And here I want to speak for a second time about debugging this application, because I see many developers not being able to see the workflow of their application's execution. For that, I do always advise to use the debugger and to use the breakpoints inside their applications. So let's try again to debug, this time the delete employee functionality. So I can do that by hitting some breakpoints at the code I want to debug. So here it's my delete command code. So I'll put breakpoint here. And I'll put another breakpoint inside my employees controller with the delete method here, so that I can see that I have passed the right parameter and that I have actually hit the delete employee method. Hit start. So now let's say I want to delete this employee from this user interface. So I hit the delete employee. Remember that I chose the employee called it Ahmed. So when I put the cursor here on top of the selected employee, I should get the one called it Ahmed. So I use this feature in Visual Studio. It gives me the department, human resources, his name Ahmed, and with ID equal to 3. So that's the right employee I have clicked on. So I use F11 to go to the next line, and if you don't need to go line by line, and you just want to hit the next breakpoint, which is inside our employees controller here, you can go to select continue or F5 from your keyboard, and it will go straight to the next breakpoint. So remember, we passed the ID 3. Here we get the right ID, which is 3. So Entity Framework will do the work of deleting that employee. First of all, it will find that employee using the find method and giving it the ID parameter. If the employee is null, then it will return not found. Otherwise, it will go to remove that employee from the database. So here again, we are not writing SQL queries, because we are using Entity Framework that will do the work of creating the SQL query for us. And all we need to do is to call the method that we need to invoke for removing, adding, editing, or getting the employees. So after removing the employee, it will commit the changes, then it will return okay the employee. It will return the employee that was deleted inside an HTTP with okay status code. So here it is, our nice application that manages the list of employees stored inside our database using the web services implemented by ASP.NET application that we have called here from our Xamarin Forms application that works for Windows Phone, Windows 8, Android, and iOS applications. So I hope this was good for you, and if you have questions, so the comments below, I can absolutely answer those questions. And thank you for watching this video.